Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Kathryne Newton, Associate Dean for Graduate Programs and Faculty Success at Purdue University. I've had the privilege of working with Kathy in the University of Innovative Distribution Training Program for the past several years. She has dedicated her career to the advancement of distribution education from her early days at Texas A&M to her building of the Industrial Distribution Program at Purdue. One of her favorite areas of focus is on generational conflict in the workplace. I have to admit, this is one of my favorite areas as well. I'm a self-professed generational studies geek. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL prides themselves on their rapid response customer support team. They maintain a very low 1 customer support person per 20 user ratio. Now, I have a long history with this company. I met the lead developer several years ago when he attended my inventory management seminar. He didn't just attend, he absorbed the content. Every couple of years, I head up to their Michigan headquarters to talk about product enhancements and see what they're up to. I always come away impressed. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Well, hey, Kathy, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Jason. Great to see you again.
It is great to see you. You know, we don't get to do that very often. We had a year we didn't get to do that this year. No, it's very nice to be able to do that.
So, it is. Thank you for connecting.
One of the things I love to do in the show is kind of dive into your history. And why did you get involved with industrial distribution? I mean, what was the attraction there?
Well, Texas A&M. I'll give a lot of credit to Texas A&M and Don Rice and Mike Workman.
Andy Don Rice, you bet.
Because, I was at A&M. I actually started in business and learned pretty quick that I did not want to get into accounting. I loved technical. I have an aptitude for it. Did not want to be an engineer. My family's filled with engineers. And then I found out that ID had something that combined not engineering, but engineering technology plus business. And I was like, okay, I've got to go see this. And then it was, some marketing and salesmanship and communications, things I just loved. And it was a natural fit for me. And the rest is, as they say, is history. I ended up teaching there for a while and then finished a Ph.D. and Purdue courted me up to help them with an ID program.
That's great. Yeah, moving up. And you were down at A&M 10 years about?
Pretty close, right at 8 years.
8 years,
teaching.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, excellent. And then were you born and raised in Texas? Is that why you wound up at A&M?
Actually, no, born in Ponca City. I'm kind of an oil brat. My dad was president and CEO of Conoco's Pipeline, and of course, Ponca City, Oklahoma, original Conoco. And so I lived there, and then he moved eventually to moved the pipeline to Sugar Land, Texas, the tax-friendly state. And
yes,
so,
indeed.
But I'd been in Colorado a few years, so I'd been moved around a bit.
Gotcha. I understand.
But I love Texas. It's a great place.
And so when you went to Purdue, did they have an ID program at this time, or are you really just launching this?
They had just started it as an option within their industrial technology program. Mm-hmm. And so it took a couple of years. We developed out the curriculum. There was only one gentleman there who just heard about it and loved it and jumped into it, and they hired me and off we ran with it. So it was fun.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And it's still alive. We've changed names. Supply chain management technology didn't quite work because people get us confused over there with the business school Craner. So now we're supply chain and sales engineering technology, which fits exactly what we teach and where our students go. Lots of them go into sales engineering, and we're ABET accredited. That's the same accreditation board that does engineers and engineering technologists. So
gotcha.
We're highly technical in what we do.
Okay. So, it's interesting because when people say supply chain management, and I get that people ask me, what you do for a living. That's often a very complicated answer, when
yes, it is.
It's like, well, I do a little this, I do a little that, but, and I'll say distribution, I teach distribution management and I coach distribution management. Oh, you mean like supply chain stuff? I'm like, well, well, not exactly.
Sorta.
Yeah, sort of, exactly. And I think there's a misunderstanding around when I look at supply chain management, I'm thinking more the logistics people, people who really dig on that stuff. And that's not me. I mean,
Well,
I hate to do it.
you get into a university and you realize pretty quickly that we are not logisticians,
Yes.
but they sort of claim what we do is their
Mhm.
purview also. It's interesting when you're in a university environment, but we were cross-disciplinary before it was cool to be
Mhm.
cross-disciplinary. That is for sure.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So why did you stay in academia? I mean, you could have easily gone and, you had all this backing and you had, you could have gone really anywhere, with your educational and your speaking background and the whole thing.
I've always wanted to teach. I always knew I would be good at it. I think when I had the opportunity to do that after getting an MBA, because I had a husband living there and a kid, and the MBA made really good sense for me. And then Don Rice said, "Oh my gosh, we got one of our own and great student, and she's got an MBA. Let's bring her over here and let her teach." And then got to loving it and got the chance to do some public speaking over there. And they're a really big continuing education program. Had a lot of fun with that and realized two things. This is what I wanted to do for a living. And number two is you don't want to do that at a Division I research institution without a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Gotcha.
I started jumping into that and had an opportunity to do some full-time consulting for a quality control company. I was a certified quality manager and did a lot of that while I finished the PhD. It gave me flexibility to do that.
Sure.
And then I was recruited up to Purdue.
Isn't it amazing? And I found out a little later in life that I really did enjoy teaching. And that's really why, I got into what I do now. But just that feeling of getting up in front of that audience and that feedback. And that was something that, was just very attractive to me as well. That was just something that's like, man, I really, really enjoy this.
You brought up feedback. I learn more by teaching in industry than I do anywhere else, just by the nature of the questions and the answers that I get. It's an easy way to stay up with what's really going on in the businesses. And
It
fun.
really is.
It's just fun.
It is. It's fun. It's enjoyable. And, I won't say that I tell a lot of jokes, but I enjoy watching the audience laugh,
Right.
and it's more self-deprecating humor, okay,
Yeah.
here's the dumb thing I did, please don't do this ever again. Yeah, this is bad.
Right. Oh man, there's plenty of materials for jokes when you're talking about distribution of any kind, right? I mean, you can always find something that somebody did that actually that people usually relate to.
Sure. And I think that's part of the magic when we are speaking up there and teaching is the war stories. They really don't want to hear the great successes. It's the war stories. How did you really kick, that stub your toe?
Right. Those are magic illustrations that make good points.
Mm-hmm. And I think, one of the things that's kept me around that distribution world is the audiences and the types of people I see in the audiences. I'm always attracted to salt of the earth, that want to work, that they're hardworking and they actually want to be there. That's the other nice thing, that's really enjoyable.
Jason, that's probably another big reason. The minute I started doing public speaking and going to some of these trade shows and meeting the real people and learning stories about them, and the stories of the owner who started in his garage and a couple of people ended up working their whole lives for the guy. And even when he couldn't pay them. And, when they retired, he buys them a Cadillac every 4 years for the rest of his life. You meet people like that in the distribution business and you just got to love it.
Absolutely. And they're just wonderful people to be around, the privately held family businesses. And I think part of it is I just want to see them make it to that next generation if possible.
Right.
And give them any tool possible. And
lots of them do, lots of them don't, but lots of them
don't.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I'll often ask my students now, how many of you, want to own your own business? And they all hands go up and I say, how many of you parents have a business? And frankly, those aren't the same people who said they want to. They've learned a lot.
Yeah. They say, and maybe I don't want to do that. I watch my parents and maybe I don't. Yeah, that's probably not. But it is kind of a rare thing. And I think it's kind of a wonderful thing when I see families move into that next generation and how that dynamic occurs. So
Yes.
So speaking of generations, this is something that you spend an awful lot of time teaching and helping people understand, especially managers, understand really the generational differences and conflict. So again, what attracted you to that field of study?
Actually, I've taught all kinds of things, at UID and other places, but
Sure.
one of them that I've done for a long time is personnel productivity, everything from hiring and firing and everything in between. How do you grow? How do you measure productivity? What are the things you got to do to give good feedback and communicate well? And interestingly enough, it turned out more and more that I really had to include the generations because it was beginning to make a difference. Boomers had exploded into the field, and then all of a sudden you've got this Gen X, and that's how old I am. I mean, I sort of watched some of that happening, and at some point I started putting it in there, and people wanted more of it.
Sure.
And so I ended up doing a half-day program, and gosh, I've done versions of that at lots of trade associations, probably since 2012, 2015, something like that.
Yeah, it's a very attractive, and I would agree with you that you do wind up bringing it into whatever else you're speaking about or whatever personnel related, and I teach that's got to be a part of it because there is just generational conflict. I mean, this is something that when I ask, especially when I do private work with a company and I'll work with a group of branch managers or management team.
Right.
One of the things I'll ask is, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing right now? And invariably it is somebody says, well, I have a bunch of people that are older than me that I'm supposed to be managing or younger than me, vice versa. And that generational conflict is one of the toughest things these folks are facing.
That's right. And it's not surprising. I mean, we've got literally 5 generations working side by side right now. And I don't think that's going to change, at least not tomorrow. We start with the top traditionalists. And if you're in age 76 to 99, and the truth is we still got lots of 76, 80, even some 90-year-olds in the workforce. And I see it every time at a UID, and I ask people, and yes, they're there. And they are as they sound. They're traditional in lots of ways, And then you've got the boomers from about 57 to 75, depending on which age mileposts you use. But that's pretty good norm. And those boomers, you got to understand, I'll put myself in it. We are retiring to the tune of 10,000 per day in this country and have for quite a few years and will continue on for seveveral more years. 10,000 a day? Yeah. That means we're exiting stage left. We were not too long ago, not long ago in 2020, it switched from being boomers as the largest percentage generation population in the U.S. working. Now it's millennials. Yeah. Sort of skipped over the sandwich.
Skipped over us Gen Xers.
You Gen Xers.
A little,
You're the snarly Gen X.
We are the cynical, we're small but mighty. And
That's true. You're the sandwich group in between the boomers and the millennials. And that's age 45 to 57. And that's the latchkey kids, right?
Yep.
The first ones who are willing to take more time off for less money.
That's right.
You guys were
free time
irreverent,
the
Beavis and Butthead generation, excuse my language, but it fits. You were the first skeptical and not so sure you were willing to obey the rules just because somebody said you were supposed to.
Right. Well, I think we got, raised on television. So we really got a lot of our influences in television. And as you said, Beavis and Butthead, MTV, but we also saw things like Watergate was kind of a big thing when we were little kids. We saw this and when Nixon resigned instead of getting fired, that was a big deal for us that we all of a sudden couldn't trust government. We couldn't trust authority figures. And that stayed with us.
I think that's absolutely true. For me, it was the death of John F. Kennedy. I mean, that had the big impact on us baby boomers in a different way. And I can certainly see why that would make you skeptical of leadership, right? To see that kind of thing happening. By the way, Gen Xers are still 35% of the working population. So they're no slouch. Right.
And we're trying to figure out how to retire now. We want out now.
Well, you got that right. You are into work-life balance, probably.
We are very into work-life balance.
more than, or at least as much as these later groups too. So let me move on. We got millennials, right? And this is now the new dominant group, and it's just shade up there. It's 35 million, 72 million people. That's age 24 to 44. So some of these are in management now, moving up.
Sure.
The latter, they want freedom, flexibility. They are willing to earn respect, and they'll stick around if you've earned it, and they can be loyal, but they'll make a change too. They're very innovative, love entrepreneurship, right? Love
Absolutely.
to work.
Yeah.
And I often encourage people to use them that way. And then, of course, Gen Zs, and those are now up to age 24, and they're almost as much as careful with their money as traditionalists because they watch lots of parents.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. And so they want structure, they want stability, they want a fixed salary. They're also very willing to step out to the gig economy.
Yes.
In fact, there's some folks who think that as many as 30-40% are going to leave the normal workforce and go do their own thing, which could include lots of different things. And they're digital natives. Listen, I've seen that on campus. I had a grad student just graduated a year or two ago, and she just put up a website, started sourcing organic cosmetics, put a label on it, created this deal, put herself through school that way.
Yeah.
Us baby boomers aren't that creative, right?
I love it, but I love this. I think that, unfortunately, the younger generations get knocked a lot. There's a lot of people that they knock them for this and that, non-competitive. Everybody had to get a trophy, all that kind of stuff. And so you hear a lot of that negative feedback. I hear that a lot, especially, when I'm teaching or working with someone in that boomer generation or even my generation, we look at it, they're entitled and they want that entry-level CEO job and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's really a big misunderstanding.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's important that we understand, and I am not a basher of millennials or Gen Zs or any of them. And the literature is very interesting because a lot of them will say, yes, while there are some important things that do distinguish us, and you and I mentioned some earlier, the truth is every new generation sort of is dismissive of the ones that came before them and the ones that come after.
Right,
There's always conflict like that. And you can't always just put everybody in an easy nutshell. I had a young man who should have been a millennial graduate 5-6 years ago and said, I don't really fit Dr. Newton in this thing. And I could tell very quickly he lived in the country with his mom and dad on the farm and his grandparents are next door and he's in the church every time the door's open. You're a boomer, buddy.
Yeah, I hate to say you are. Yeah. You're just a young boomer.
You just don't fit the mold.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And by the way, he's making a fortune in the distribution industry. He loves it.
Sure.
He fits in well, not afraid of the mechanics, You can't put everybody in these neat, tidy boxes.
I would agree.
Big difference between rural, and urban interpretations on these things too. So it's important. Is it real to some degree? Absolutely, yes. Does it cause some conflict in the workplace? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, the thing that got me really excited about this and really became a generational geek, I really like this stuff. There was a researcher, this is, going back quite a few years now. Her name is Claire Rains. I don't know if you've ever run across, and she wrote a book.
I've heard that name. But.
Yeah, her website is generationsatwork.com. And she wrote, the second book was called Generations at Work, but the first one was called Connecting Generations. And this is when I was a branch manager in my family business and I hated it, and I was like, oh my God, I've got people a lot older than I was, a lot younger. And I was just, absolutely having a very, very difficult time with this. And fortunately, I ran across her. She happened to live in Denver, and so did I. She gave me her book, and it absolutely saved my career. Barna, and I will always say that. But just the way that looking at these different generations, understanding their influences, their characteristics, and almost being given permission that I didn't have to treat everybody the same. I had to tailor my comments and work with people a little differently. And I don't think anybody ever taught me that.
In distribution, it ought to be sort of a natural thing. And I think for some salespeople it is because they were taught to mirror, the people that we're talking to, both in terms of speed and the way they talk, but also, if we're really good listeners, and we ought to be listeners best, if we're nothing else, right, then we ought to be able to relate to them where they are, which is what I think you're saying.
Absolutely.
But you're right. And then when it's generational, you really have to think about it sometimes because it doesn't come naturally.
Right. And I think that's what I loved about doing the research and reading this. And I became very obsessed with reading about this because learning about meeting people where they are, exactly what you said, it was less about me anymore. and more about the person I was trying to work with and communicate with and perhaps influence.
Right, right. It's important. And now you throw in the digital native differences, right? Gen Z has literally never known a time in their life where they didn't have the internet.
Right, right.
How's that for
It's
different?
Yeah, or even I think it was my youngest at probably 5 or 6 years old, well, Dad, can you Google it? I'm like, well, what? Okay. Apparently that's important, to know that.
I'm all true confessions. I'm still teaching both my husband and the group last week that I was talking to at CPMR. I said, you can find a YouTube for anything.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
How to calculate these ratios that I was teaching you. Financial, it's all on there. How to start your snowblower when it won't work, when there's 6 feet out there. You can find a YouTube for that model you have, I promise you. And they were like, it's true. You can.
Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
nothing you can't find by Googling it or YouTubing it, or it's out there.
But I think your point is very well taken, that for us, it may be less natural to do that. We have to go ask somebody. We have to go call a mechanic or whatever it is.
I had to be taught that myself,
Yeah. Today, people, and I think what was fascinating, this was a few years back. I had an intern working with me, and she was she was 20, right around 20, and she was still a college student. And she actually, though, to find an answer to fix the website, she would spend much more time researching it online rather than calling the 800 number that I paid for.
I'll bet that's right.
Yeah. I'd watch her get in frustrated. She'd be ripping through all these different websites and YouTube videos. And I finally said, Corey, here's an 800 number. You can call these people and they'll tell you exactly how to do this. No, I got this. I'm like, okay.
I confess, I just got a new iPhone 12 and did the same thing. I'm looking and nothing worked. And I thought, I'm an idiot. Just go to the website and there's a chat box, and that guy took care of me in 3 minutes. Right.
It is funny. So yeah, so you're emulating your younger generation, students here. So
I know. It's
it's good though. No, it's kind of nice. Keeps you young and keeps you, deep with the youngins. But again, sometimes there are those misunderstandings about these folks. And one of the things, Steve Dice and I had that conversation, and we talked about keeping younger generations, millennials and now, Gen Z, keeping them engaged and keeping them filled, or else they will leave you and they'll go elsewhere.
That's exactly right. They are different in lots of ways than even the GenXers. I mean, they are, as I mentioned, digital natives. Mm-hmm. Which means they would probably, although they're still, willing to use email, the phone, in person, they don't quite get the reason for all of that. Right. In fact, if I hear complaints most often from even my friends who are in my category, are just, why doesn't anybody ever want to talk to somebody? Pick up the doggone phone. Would you do it so we can actually have a real conversation about this? Sure. And God help them when they text and that's all they want to do, And it just doesn't make sense. But yet millennials are more into email, and the Gen Zs are really into text, and that's what they know.
Right.
And I'm pretty much now a big believer in having management that helps everybody understand the reasons for these differences and what they grew up with. And at least as far as that goes, why not just match the technology to the task? Some things we've got to sit down face to face with. There's a lot of times it is, if I'm approaching a new subject, I'd better pick up a phone and talk to them. I don't care how well I know them. I better be sure that I've got that room for feedback, instant feedback. And we know from we can look through all of this through a communication theory lens. And without instant feedback, you're probably going to have problems. And that's really where both email and text can fail us. Now, if it's regular communications, when are we meeting? What's the latest? Sure. Emails, text works fine. So to me, good managers spend a little time, number one, talking with everybody about these preferences and what do they want. Sure. And let's just create some parameters for this, some go-bys, some rules. And don't have to be hard and faced, but that could sure help.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the understanding, I think that's the big thing, is that understanding that people are not going to communicate in the same manner that you are, and they are going to respond differently, and things are going to be more attractive forms of communication. But I do believe that you're right. There is a time for synchronous communication, where you do have the feedback and you can use inflection pitch and all the different, nonverbal cues as well to get that message. And obviously when we do email and text, that's gone. That's absolutely gone, and the context is gone.
Yeah. And worse than that, text can be in text talk,
Yes, a whole nother language, hieroglyphics in many cases. Yes.
Yes, it is. So that's fun.
And I'll tell you, one of the more terrifying things is my mother, my 83-year-old mother, loving emojis, and she becomes emoji crazy, and it's like,
oh, that's hysterical.
Oh yeah. She embraced text a couple of years ago, and now she's dangerous with it, and it's just,
oh my gosh.
Oh, mom, you're killing me here, but it's good. Funny to watch. It is good for her. Yeah,
good. Yeah, exactly. She can talk to the grandkids all day long.
That's exactly right. That's
emojis,
what she does.
Right?
She does. She texts the grandkids because that's how she knows that's the only way she'll get them to talk to her. So I'm like, okay,
that is hysterical. 83. I'm tickled. I'd like to meet your mom. She
she's pretty funny. Yeah, she is funny. One of the things that, you and I shared with you earlier about, this article I ran across, it kind of bothered me. It was one of those I went, ooh, this is kind of a little bit of a controversy. And it talked a little bit about older millennials. And actually, when you said some of the millennials are at 44, I thought, oh God, when do millennials get 40? That scared me, first of all. But some of them are looking back at some of their perhaps mismanagement of student loans or the student loan debt that maybe they're looking back and regretting that debt, and even regretting maybe even spending that much time or that much money on a university education. So that's one of the things I wanted to get your take on this a little bit.
Well, I've been a professor a long, long time now.
Sure.
And I can even name you a couple of undergraduate students who later became student workers and then grad student workers for me. Mm-hmm. One was with me when I was still a department head, and loved that woman. And she got that master's degree. She took out loans for every bit of it and didn't think twice about it. But she was also working for me. And I remember thinking to myself man, why is she doing all of that? Because she had some fee remits. When you've got a grad student appointment for 20 hours a week, most places, and including Purdue, your fees are paid for. She shouldn't have had to do that, but yet she still took out loan. And she, I think, has just burned those papers and paid them off. She's got a company at a great, awesome major manufacturer who sells through distribution all the time. And I won't mention the name, but I was always disappointed for her that it happened, because I just don't think she had any thought that it would be that much money and would take that length of time. A lot of this is about financial education in high school and understanding,
I would agree.
What that means to take on that kind of debt. She fortunately came out with a fabulous job. She makes a good amount of money, and here she's within 10 years got it all paid off, but it was a big chunk of change. Right now, it's only 39% of students that on average graduate from college. Only 39% are debt-free.
Right.
That's not good. Now, I'm at a place called Purdue University where 59% of ours come out debt-free, and we've been really creative about doing that. And we're blessed. We've got a president who literally, I told you, 7 years. He's actually now is holding it out through 23. Our tuition will be frozen for 10 years. And you think, oh man, that's got to be terrible on the university. No, we've continued to get raises, but he has leaned our university like crazy. He did exactly what you're supposed to, whether it was outsourcing different things, getting rid of things that we didn't need, not paying leases on things, silly things. I mean, the man has been brilliant about using money wisely at Purdue University and has been able to literally freeze that. So now, instead of being one of the most expensive in the Big Ten, we're the best bargain. Yeah. Particularly when you consider we're number 53 out of, some 1,500 universities that were ranked again. And we're way up there, and we're the number 5th most innovative, which is really a big deal when you consider none of the Big Ten schools are in that innovation. We're right up there with Stanford and some of those folks in terms of innovation. Got to tell you some of the things we've done. Degree in 3 Our president put out
Okay.
a call and said, which one of you colleges can come up with a degree in 3? And he had a big prize incentive to go with it. Now everybody's got a way to get a Bachelor of Science in 3 years. You can save $19,000 alone just by plowing right through and getting your degree in 3 years.
Fantastic.
Same degree, but it's just organized a little well. We do something called Back a Boiler, where we've got alumni who want to help our students by loaning them the money personally and essentially arranging for a way to get that paid back, with a much lower interest rate. And they're not going to be held
Back
feet
a
to the fire.
boiler.
This
I
is
like
something
that.
that's
I like
supported
that.
by Purdue University and helps them. We've got fast start. Students can get up to a year of their college done in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I've seen programs like
the
that.
challenge, I think, is for colleges, if they're going to, and you better have a great education too. And we do. We're well renowned for everything from engineering to ag to our Polytechnic is making big strides. And we are growing at a time when most universities are not. So it can be done, but it's a bigger challenge, I think, for universities today than ever before to fit in what has to be the new mold. We have to be wiser about our students and helping them not have to pay so much for this education, figure out how to get out quicker and not take on that debt. I think really advisors right up front ought to be talking about, what are you going to do with this job? Is there a job? Parents need to be asking questions. I was talking to somebody recently and they said they were going on for a master's in history. And I thought, oh my gosh, what are you going to do for a living? And,
Right.
And we sat down and talked about it. I love history. That would be my second career if I could do it, and it's the kind of thing that I spent a lot of time in. Tough to make a living. I've got friends who were tenure track in that and 1 out of 12,000 applicant kind of things,
I have a good friend who has a master's in poetry. I'm like, good on you, man. But what are you going to do with that? Let's be realistic. And again, it's not a knock on that, and I think it's great to go after your passions, but
It is.
you better have some pretty good financial backing to pull that one off, and I'm sorry, that's just
right.
it's
and
making
or
realistic
recognize,
choices.
look, we know that there's a large percentage of our graduates that don't go into what they actually graduated
Absolutely.
for, but yet we've still got 90% of placement at graduation of our graduates. They can find a job, and a lot of companies are looking for, believe it or not, places like Google love liberal arts majors. They're good coders. They're creative. So you're going to have to be willing and able and creative in going out there and find a job. If you followed your passion and you've got those degrees that you might not be able to. Now, Grant, you could always teach those things. You can be creative and do things like that, but you got to have a backup plan. I like what you said there. You do.
Yeah. Well, it's just, and again, I think you're right. It goes back to a lot of this education in high school, really talking, what do you really want to do with this? And part of me sometimes it questions the maturity of a, 17, 18-year-old trying, going in and really signing up for this debt that they could be hanging on to well into their 40s. And so, a lot of me, as I was preparing for this interview and thinking a little bit more about this, I kind of went back to neuroscience for a little bit and said, if we know that frontal lobes are not developed fully until 20, into the early 20s,
right?
Is it a good investment at 18, years old to do this? Or, I hate to say, this is one of the things I do love about, military service. You have some years to mature and do some things like that.
I do too. It is a great way to spend some time maturing, and there's other places that you can volunteer that really need young people to do that with. It is important that they think carefully about what they want to do. It's important for their parents to get involved. And education is still worth the money. The numbers are out there, and I'm not going to be able to quote them right off the top of my head, but college graduates make more money by, I think it's $1 million over the life of their career. But not everybody does that. And I agree with you that if you're not ready to go to college, you can wait, particularly now. By the way, there are a lot of scholarships that go unused every single year. There's more grants than you might know. There's grants out there to educate folks in industrial distribution. If you really go and look, if you get your parents involved and you've got a passion, they may be able to find, just with some research, online, and it might really take some time, but those applications aren't difficult. And if you've got financial issues or you've got really great grades and super high ACT scores, there's money out there for you, but you need to get educated. And there's people out there, there's advisors on each campus that can help you do that too.
Sure.
So I'd say that's another big error. I've seen a lot of people they just assume that that's the only way they can get through, and they don't ask and don't seek.
It is amazing, Kathy. So actually, one of my closest friends, his daughter just graduated from a private university, and it's about a $50,000 a year gig. This is all in. It's expensive, but the amazing thing is that she went out in her senior year of high school and made it her job to go and hunt every possible source of money, every possible source of funding, and she wound up funding 80% of that through grants and scholarships and things like that. And so when she came out, she literally just graduated last week. And I want to say that what should have been about a $200,000 in indebtedness, I think she was around $40,000.
Wow.
And so you're like, so it's possible. It's possible, but I don't know if that's something that people are either taught, or I just don't know how to get that across to high school seniors
I
or
agree
juniors.
with you. But I do have students who are putting themselves through, some that are really underprivileged and who just have learned how to work hard. Some of them have their own businesses of all kinds, and they just do it by golly. And if they have to sit out a semester and save some money, that's what they do. They just get it done on their own because there's no other way to do it.
And there are some companies I know of, and we talked about how much we love the distribution, the salt of the earth distribution families, but there's a lot of wonderful programs that do offer tuition assistance. These companies, and I think that honestly, I would be seeking out a company that offers that tuition assistance, because that's something that the owner of that business feels that's part of their DNA. They want to help that person succeed.
Hey, if they've got a great employee, they will invest in that employee.
Absolutely.
And I see that all of the time. And at the graduate level, all of our online students are getting paid their way through, whether it's a certificate, master's degree, and now we have a doctorate of technology. And let me tell you, we've got people from Google and Oracle and Microsoft in that doctorate of technology getting paid for by their companies.
Sure.
And so,
absolutely.
That's another thing. If you really want to take yourself into the next level, I got to put a plug in there for grad programs because they work, and you don't have to be on a residential deal. But if you are, get yourself a TA ship and it'll pay for your fees and dues and pay you a salary besides, It's not a bad gig either.
Nope, it isn't. And I think sometimes people say, well, I'm delaying my career. It's like, look, as you and I both know, we got a long time to do anything we want once that education's done.
That's exactly right. There's
a whole lot of years.
There's a whole lot of years back.
Yeah. If I could kind of segue to another subject, something that's near and dear to both of us, this University of Innovative Distribution. This is something you took on and have really worked on and really kind of driven out of. So true confession, when I was a UID student, it was held at the University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Yes, it was. I used to teach there too.
Yeah. And it was, let's just say that the accommodations were a little more Spartan, a little more, they weren't as luxurious as they are today and nice as they were. So it's really stepped up quite a bit.
And when Jay Smith retired, he asked me if I would take over. Gary Buffington always wanted it housed in a university, and he'd started a certificate program. And so I literally had to go up all the way to the provost's office and get permission to do that based on, if you sit in through one of the UID programs and you can get the rough equivalent, or sit into 3 of them over a period of 3 years or 5 or 8 years, we'll give you a certificate, Purdue Certificate of Innovative Distribution. Of course, then it was industrial distribution.
I remember, and I was confused on the name change, but I've grown to love that name change.
That was Joe Thompson, for those of you who know him.
Oh, I know.
Idea.
Yeah.
We wanted to keep it UID and couldn't figure out how to do that. But we had so many more different trade groups besides, well beyond the boundaries of what's considered industrial distribution.
Right.
So it was just a nice time and worked well. But you're right. At first, and we were at IUPUI in their conference center for a while, and then they decided to turn that into dorms, and we found the JW Marriott in Indianapolis.
And it's a lovely place.
I had taken over that coordinator job, so built the curriculum, negotiated with one of the places we worked long and hard. It still was lucky enough to get to speak in it. Now, Joe Thompson sold his group and it's been taken over. And so now I'm kind of an advisor to that group, and it's still so much fun. Of course, COVID really, we're blessed. Last year, we actually were the last program, the JW Marriott.
Oh, I remember. That was my last flight. Yeah, that was my last flight. It was March 6th.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And then this year, of course, we were able to pull off a virtual one, and I think we're about to start planning for March, hoping that I think we've got it under contract with some flexibility. Of course, nobody knows what will happen, but we're really hoping it will be in the JW Marriott. It is, you're right, it's a big step up, and it's been a great gig there.
You know, it's interesting. I run across distributors all the time. I mean, all the time in my private work and in my facilitation work and whatnot that have never heard of this program. And that still surprises me. I mean, I keep thinking, come on, you've never heard of this. And maybe sometimes I've seen in the associations that's really they're charged to disseminate that information to the membership. But I think they just have a bad database. They tend to go to the owners or key contact is the phrase, and they don't reach the people who actually want to attend.
Right.
And I think that's a failure.
And it is tough. I also have known so many people who have no clue what it is, and they go, oh, this is a huge program. We've had over 700 right there in the JW Marriott from all over the world, literally.
Yep, absolutely.
Had great successes. So
yeah, and frankly, it's my favorite event. Absolutely my favorite event. And I love getting the first Sunday morning session because I get to welcome them and tell them, hey, I did this. I am one of the people, I sat where you sat. And that's the fun part about it. I've always loved that part about it. So
I know it is so much fun. We've had a great time. It almost feels like family because we have known so many of the speakers for so many years. And while it's changing more, 712 is the new association that's really brought some new life into it. And Gary Buffington started with the University of Mine. Well, we always added a few people every year. Now they really want to keep moving and adding new people, and which is a good thing. I mean, this is the era where you better be into, I'm reading adaptive spaces. You better be thinking towards the future, right? Or
sure.
You're going to get left behind. So they're doing a great job with it.
Well, yeah, if you got Talbot and Molly, running around together, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to be on your toes.
Exciting things. And it's going to be
exciting.
Fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have been exactly that, fun to work with and doing good things. So
Sure. Well, Kathy, I'm just looking down at the time. I'm thinking, well, we should probably wrap this up. But hey, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's just such a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure to be with you today. A lot of fun. And I'll look forward to, I'm hoping we're going to get to see each other in person next March.
I'm hoping we get to. So
all right.
Anyway, you be well. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.